Please welcome to the stage, Brigid.
My brain is like the set of a horror movie without the lights, camera, action. One of those abandoned houses up on a hill with an endless number of spiraling staircases and doors with chains for locks. And I have been wandering these halls for far too long, picking up keys and putting them down. And I gotta tell ya that I hear things in the walls sometimes that go bump in the night, and I know it's not quite right, and I think it's about time I put up a fight, and for the first time in my life, I know how. But first, a bit of backstory. Picture the scene. You've probably heard this one before. A 20-something-year-old wakes up and snaps on her classiest rain jacket and reddest lipstick and picks up her non-fat, no-whip latte and heads downtown handing out resumes searching for it. You know, the great and ethereal it, the moment when the skies part and the hand of God reaches down and all of a sudden it all makes sense. All the things she told herself she'd understand when she was older. And yet every day, it never comes. And then she goes home and puts on a little black dress and arranges her breasts all perky and heads down to the local bar and ends up searching for it in the bottom of a bottle of beer. But then, plot twist, another 20-something-year-old walks in, but this one's tall, dark, and handsome, and he ends up searching for it all over her naked body. The moment they locked eyes, serotonin trampled their libidos like a line of angry Scotsmen. You've probably heard this one before, right? Their story begins and ends the same by publishing standards. It's really quite lame and cliche, which is why we shall stay away from that. Instead, our tale follows a different sort of archetype. The onlooker of our first scene sits nondescriptly in a corner, observing the pair, unable to understand how what appears to be nothing but a batting of eyelashes can bring these two so much pleasure. Which brings me to my point. Isn't the brain a funny thing? So many shades of gray and pink and chartreuse. In fact, the brain is such a troubling enigma, as I have learnt after far too many years of wandering these halls I have built for myself, that I'm thinking of opening up my own brain shop. Tinker with your top, I'll call it. It's a perfect idea, exactly what our market needs. After all, everyone's got a brain and no one's quite too happy with the one they got. Some are too big or too small or too broken. Just a small token I would charge for a small rewiring of a brain that is tiring, of not being able to keep up with the newest model, feeling like they're having to toddle around high IQs and prestigious degrees. I can see it now. Picture the scene. The doorbell would ring, and in would walk a man with the stench of shame shrouding his swagger, and he'll ask for a bit of hypnosis to unlock his hangover, or maybe he'll start to ask to think with his head, you know, the one with the brain in the skull, not the one down below. And I will simply tell him that it is a service we do not offer, that you can change a lot of things, but human nature isn't one. And yes, of course, I'll be lying. I dare you to find me an example of human nature that is more than a crossing of wires or release of hormones. We are nothing but living metalwork, operating under the foolish impression that we choose who, what, or if we get to love. Yet as our onlooker runs this over and over again in their brain, their confusion does not fade, because if we could choose, why would anyone choose that? Far too often there is rage instead of romance, sadness instead of sex, crying instead of candlelit dinners. Even after picking up the pieces of my friend's broken heart, she still tells me that it's worth it. And maybe it's because my brain decided to make the key to the room with my that holds my serotonin something other than a pair of pretty eyes. But foolish little me likes to believe that I could change that. I'd like to believe that I could open up a shop to anyone who'd ever had their heart broken, and I'd like to believe that they'd come, that they'd flock to my shop like moth to flame, and I hate that the reality would be me going gray in an old room with a crossword game. There are some who stare at moons, dot their eyes with hearts, write at midnight about the way they like to be touched, who can stroll the four walls of their heart like a museum, observing every nook and cranny of themselves. Yet there are some, like our now altogether lost onlooker, who can only ever experience second-hand romance. Tales from lips of another smothered in the oh-so-reddest lipstick. And yeah, maybe the second type of people are missing out. Maybe they do hug their pillows as if they were people, dread they will never wake up to a more than an empty alarm clock. Maybe they do spend their days as a child planning their dream house but not their dream wedding. Maybe they do sit alone on Valentine's Day, unable to say why it hasn't quite worked out for them this far, but not confident enough to say that maybe they didn't want it to. Or maybe they did. Maybe they desperately wanted to feel all the things they had been promised they would when they were younger. Maybe they grew up with bated breath, waiting for their ones their mother warned them about to sweep them off their feet, only to end up in nondescript corners of bars, dusty shops, strolling the halls of their brain. They're strolling the halls of themselves, their own brain as impenetrable as Fort Knox. But it's not important, right? A crossings of wires. A release of chemicals. Nothing more. For a small fee, I can fix it right up and you won't have to put yourself back together again and again and again. And I tell myself this again and again and again as I ask who I'm trying to kid. These crossword games no longer interest me the way they once did.
Come on, give it a bravo! Woo! Take a big bow, take a big bow.